Hey, oh my God, this is wonderful. My friend, I didn't know you can hear good vibes using these things. All I can hear running in the blood of this wonderful animal is good vibes. Wonderful creature of God. Myself, I'm Y311H, and together with my bunny friends here, we are straight out of Africa with lots of good vibes, peace, honesty, forgiveness, and unity as our message to the whole world. So, wonderful soul, good vibes creature of God, I would request you to join us on this mission of spreading those good vibes virtues to all earthlings by watching this video till the end and hitting the like button. Good vibes soul. See, we do understand that the greatest, I mean, surgeon or doctor that has ever existed is God Almighty, the one that created and knitted your body the way it is perfectly made. And for that reason alone, my friend, we never ever start our show without giving thanks or acknowledging that mighty supreme creator. Now, my friend, we shall be doing that, but just in some few seconds after we are done reading from this Good Waves book of wisdom, the guide of life, if you'd like to say, and this is what it says. Your name, O Lord, endures forever. You are renowned, O Lord, through all generations. For the Lord will vindicate his people and have compassion on his servants. The idols of the nations are silver and gold, made by the hands of men. They have mouths but cannot speak, eyes but they cannot see. They have ears but cannot hear, nor is there breath in their mouths. Those who make them will be like them, and so will all who trust in them. God is great, my friend. That's what we have just started by saying. So let's give thanks together. Thank you, dear Lord Father, for this day. Thank you for this minute, dear Lord, for this platform, Father, that you've given us and gathered us here together, Father. Guide us through reacting to these videos, Father, with our intentions of spreading love, peace, honesty, and forgiveness. Help us, dear Lord, to do that together. In Jesus' mighty name, we do pray, trusting and believing. Amen. Let's dive in good vibes. Much, much love.
Yesterday afternoon, something strange caught John Herrera's eye in the canal by his house.
I seen like a fish, long fish, but it was upside down, just seen his belly.
It wasn't a fast food bag or a tadpole or a beer can.
I was like, that's a big old fish. Never even caught a fish that big before.
So he did what any red-blooded man would do. He went in after it.
Like I had one of my friends grab my arm, and I just reached in, I grabbed it by his tail, pulled it out, and my friend let me go, and then I threw it over. When I threw it over, I hit him in the leg with it. And he was like, oh, you hit me with the fish. I was like, it's a shark.
That's right, a shark, a 3.5-foot long dead leopard shark in a Clovis canal. Word got out quick.
I noticed him, and then I noticed right in front of him was a shark. And it was just the damnedest thing.
I was like, look at my shark.
Leopard sharks are saltwater sharks.
So consumer technology is stagnating, right? Like you've watched them unveil a new iPhone several years in a row, and the features are just, the camera has slightly more pixels. Like with the newest model, the only selling point is the AI assistant, but many of us thought that's what Siri was, right? It's a voice you can talk to that will give you answers. So what's this AI thing? But one of the best examples I've seen recently was today when they unveiled the next PlayStation console, the PS5 Pro. It is $700. It's going to be about $800 if you want a disk drive. And today they released a brief video presentation that went exactly the way all of these hardware unveilings do these days, where they went on and on and on about how they have beefed up the GPU and added AI and so on. Then when it came time to show you what it can actually do, you got moments like this.
Results can be pretty amazing, with graphics showing something like fidelity levels of detail, but it doubled the frame rate. Here's The Last of Us Part 2 running on PS5 Pro. Let's compare this to the fidelity mode on PS5, which is only running at 30 frames per second and is therefore much choppier.
And this was the presentation. Just over and over again, he was saying, look at the shocking improvements you're seeing on this new $700 or $800 machine. I mean, look at it compared to the old PlayStation. That probably makes you want to puke in comparison. Wow. It's going to do another one here in a moment. They're going to show off the Spider-Man 2 game. It's like old versus new. Look at, that's clearly $700 worth of improvement over here. And somebody who is really into video game specs is going to point out, well, that's not a fair comparison, showing it on a little phone screen, but actually, yes, it is. If you're playing a video game in your living room on a TV, how much of your field of vision does that TV occupy? I don't doubt if you're playing it on a monitor this close to your face, you probably will be able to see the tiny pixelated differences in the old versus new image. But even to a lifelong gamer, if you sat them down and didn't tell them which machine was running, they would not know which was which. And a lot of consumer tech has reached this place.
My God, what's going on here? What? Can you see? What is that thing? Oh my God, this is unbelievable. How is this possible? Is it now that, oh, this good people of Earth, are you seeing that creature there?
Okay, friends, so my last video is talking about legal ground, and someone wanted me to talk more on the spiritual realm, and this is one of the most insane things I had to learn, right? So beginning of the year, it was a deliverance situation, and I'm praying over someone. It was an intense situation, right? And at some point, the Holy Spirit stops me, and like he starts showing me something, and I see like a literal demon walk in, grab a chair, and sit down, and I've never seen this in my life before, so I'm stumped. Like, I'm honestly like, huh? So anyway, we finished the prayer, we're still kind of going in, and at the end of the prayer, I'm talking to the person because, you know, it was very intense. And I tell the person, and the Lord tells me to tell the person, close the door. And I'm like, that's an insane thing to say, but the Lord knows why he's saying it, right? So fast forward to the situation, I keep asking the Lord, like, what do you mean close the door, close the door? The thing about demonic attacks is the devil can attack. It doesn't mean it's going to succeed. He can attack you, but the only way for it to succeed is for you to open a door. You don't have to open a door intentionally. You can do it accidentally. The door is still open and he'll take advantage of that. The Bible tells us that we have a hedge of fire around us, right? This is a protection of God over our lives, over things that concern us, over his plans of our lives, over literally anything that concerns you and God, point blank. However, the second you decide, let me, peek outside this hedge of fire, or open the door and see what's behind the door, or lose focus of what's inside the protection of God, is the second you start facing attack. One of the most easiest ways I can explain this is by talking. One thing the Lord had to teach me is shut my mouth. Like, I've talked about this before. I made videos on this a month ago. If you want to go back and watch them, they're not that far down. One of the ways you open up yourself for demonic attack is by talking about what God is doing in your life. Because the enemy does not see what God is doing in your life. He doesn't know. He literally does not have a clue what God is doing. The second you speak, he has insight into that. You know what he does? He attacks. Another big way, and the most common way, is sin. We talk about sin, and the Bible tells us the wages of sin is death. And the reason why it's that, because it doesn't just kill you physically, it kills the plan of God over your life. There's so many people I knew who had promising futures, who had all these things, and they fell into the wrong sin like that. The enemy used that against them. And the reason why is the enemy has always looked for an opportunity to hurt you. He doesn't care about you. He wants to hurt you. When you open up the door yourself, what can you do? The attack goes by so fast. And one of the reasons why God tells us to stay in his protection, because in his protection, you can see what's outside of his protection. When you're outside of the protection of God, you can't see what's inside the plan of God. It's impossible. Tried it. But when you're inside the plan of God, God shows you all the attacks the enemy has for you. I've talked about dreams very recently, and a lot of people who followed me the last month are here because of the videos I post on dreams. But dreams are an insight into what God is doing in the spiritual realm, what the enemy is trying to do into your life in the spiritual realm. And you have that insight because what? You have the all-seeing and all-knowing God. So the purpose of don't give the devil a room to enter and take a chair and sit in your life is where this kind of comes in. When the devil enters your life, he will use your life, misuse it, and abuse it, and be done with it. That's it. His plan is to waste you. So when I was seeing that and the Lord was showing me a demon taking a chair and sitting, that meant that the demon had the right to be there. You can give a demon the right to be anywhere in your life by making, like, not even a mistake you don't even think about too deeply. Do you have the wrong friends? One thing God had me analyze is, who am I telling my life to? Who am I opening my heart to? Who am I opening my mind to? Who am I sharing my spiritual walk with? That was the way I was attracting very many insane things into my life. What am I doing in my private time? How am I living my life? Am I living holy? That was another way the enemy was gaining access into my life. So many times we open up the door and we're confused when we face demonic attack. You cannot serve the enemy and be angry when you have his fruits being grown in your life. You cannot live in sin and be surprised when the consequences of sin are very clear in your life. The Lord tells us all these different things, like do not live in sin. You know why? Because he knows the consequences. He knows what happens when we open up our lives to the enemy. The enemy will use us, misuse us, and abuse us.
The key to your 20s is to be learning, to be constantly learning and your mind opening and learning skills. And you're going to learn skills and you're going to keep learning if you're excited by what you're studying. If everything is boring, your mind will close off. But if you try things that are within that parameter of what you were meant to do and you're excited by it, you're going to be developing different skills. You're going to create that excitement of life. So I want you to bring your youthful energy, your fun, your openness to life. And I want you to give it a little bit of discipline, enough focus so that you're headed in these two tracks, adventure and developing skills. Those two together, that kind of attitude towards life in your 20s will be key. Because what I want is you wake up, you're having your 30th birthday, and you go, wow, I know this is what I want to do. I have learned so many great things. I've had so many great experiences that this is the book I'm going to write, that this is the business I'm going to start. You've had these adventures, you've learned, and you go, now I'm ready to take it to the next level.
Why is no one talking about how Earth is supposed to get a second moon at the end of this month, and it's going to be visible all the way into the middle of November? And it's like they're just casually posting this shit left and right, and I'm lost. I need a nap. I thought seeing a second moon was gonna be normal, like we were just supposed to be like, oh, okay, great. No. What's even crazier is what this second moon is, and I don't understand how people are just like, looking the other way. Said I was lying to you? I wasn't. Earth will get a second mini moon for 2 months this year. Earth, like where we live? And then they go on to say that Earth will get a second moon for about 2 months this year when a small asteroid, just a small asteroid, begins to orbit our planet. The asteroid was discovered in August, yet they tell us now, revolving around Earth in a horseshoe shape for a month. And apparently the alert system for asteroid terrestrial impact was monitoring this alert that was actually funded by NASA. And they spotted this in South Africa. They've been tracking the asteroid's orbit for the last 21 days, and now they tell us. I don't know much about asteroids, but if it's orbiting for an entire month, like, should we, like, I know I'm gonna be looking up, but, like, should we be looking up? Should we be, you know, I don't know, a little apprehensive throughout the day? Like, what the fuck does this mean? Tell me now.
Fun fact. The average office worker is only productive for about 3 hours during the 8-hour workday, and studies show, on average, office workers spend 2.5 hours a day reading, writing, and replying to emails. So it could be said most of an employee's productive time in the office is spent dealing with emails. But this all comes from the fact that offices are highly unproductive places. On average, an office worker is interrupted by a coworker every 3 minutes, and it generally takes them 23 minutes to refocus. So it's not much of a surprise people are pushing back so hard against return to office mandates, because as many other studies have shown, people are far more productive in their own environment than they are sitting in an office for 8 hours a day.
I don't know how to comprehend this, but astronomers just discovered the longest jets of plasma in the entire universe. And they're coming from a black hole. Basically, as things fall towards a supermassive black hole, it gets really, really hot, things are spinning and getting ripped apart, and most of that matter falls into the black hole, but some of it gets shot away in these giant jets. So this matter was never inside of the black hole. Nothing escaped a black hole. These jets are 23 million light years long, which is incomprehensibly huge. But here's the Milky Way for scale. It's as if you lined up 140 Milky Ways back to back. The black hole at the center of this host galaxy is shooting out these jets with the power of trillions of suns. They're so big that astronomers think they interacted with and had effects on the cosmic web itself. Like they're no longer at the scale of galaxies, they're on the scale of the cosmic web. This thing is 7.5 billion light years away, which means we're seeing it as it was 7.5 billion years ago, and I need to know what it looks like now. These jets were discovered using Europe's LOFAR telescope, which was scanning the sky, and they didn't just discover these jets, these were just the biggest. No, they discovered 10,000 of what they're calling mega structures in the universe. But that project only covered 15% of the sky, so there might be even bigger jets out there that we just haven't seen.
Switzerland has an army. The reason why many people think we don't is that we don't participate in wars, but that is no obstacle to us. We have an army, we have mandatory conscription for all male citizens, we have voluntary conscription for female citizens. This means a huge proportion of our population are soldiers. Army weapons are kept in people's homes. And it is completely routine when you take the train at the beginning or the end of the weekend to have literal armies of young men in uniform with their weapons going to and from the garrison and back home. We also spend a lot of money on armaments, and sometimes we even have popular votes on army budgets. Yeah.
So this is a double pendulum. It has two nice stable modes of operation. So one is where the two bits are in phase, and it swings just more or less like a normal pendulum. And then you can also set it up so they're out of phase, and it oscillates a bit faster, but it's nice and stable. But a double pendulum is chaotic, so if you give it a big initial kick, then it will behave chaotically. When I used to demonstrate this in lectures, I would have the students put their hand down when they thought the bottom one had done its last loop-the-loop. And it's amazing how often you think it's finished and it's settled down, and then it manages to get some energy from somewhere and do another loop.
At first I was confused about what I was seeing, and I just started looking at it, trying to figure out if it was dust or a bug or what have you. And it just started looking more and more like a hand.
Watch again. Just as Whitney describes, the orb appears to slowly take the shape of a hand that seems to be caressing Leo's head. Whitney is blown away, not only because of what she's seeing, but also because she believes she knows whose hand is touching Leo. Her late husband, Ryan.
He never got to meet our son because he was in a vegetative state when Leo was born, and he passed away the April 2022 when Leo was only 4 months old, but they never really got to meet while he was healthy. So for me, I felt like it was him visiting our baby and actually being able to interact with him for the first time.
So this is our property in southern Colorado, and I was filming this crazy cloud that was off in the distance, and when I panned over to my wife, all of a sudden an actual UFO, UAP flew over us, and I was able to slow it down and catch each frame. Check this out.
Have you noticed the trick that they play on you when they name their tragedies? October 7, 9/11, 7/7. These three events have undergone datification. When you hear these words, you know exactly what event they're talking about. It's annual. It sounds more historical. It's more objective. Never again. Never forget. Annual event. Always remember. We need to do everything in our power to never let it happen again, and that means everything we do is justified. When I say October 7, you say, I know absolutely what you're talking about. When I say 9/11, I want you to see the Twin Towers in your head. Now, once you've loaded this date, and this date has become loaded, you now have got a weapon, right? And all you've got to do is, now that it's loaded, you just shoot it. So you go to a comment section of a Palestinian video, and you'll see people in response to a 2, 3, 4 minute well-spoken video with evidence, people will comment October 7. That's it. And it'll have like hundreds of likes. Sometimes, actually most of the time, they don't even bother saying they don't even bother typing October. They'll just write OCT 7. And that in and of itself has become an argument because you've loaded the date, and it's become a weapon that you can just use and throw around. That's the trick that they play on you, because now when it comes to discussions and debates, the people on the genocidal side will say October 7th. They'll just throw the date at you, and that has become an argument. Then the other side will have to be more verbose, right? Oh, Palestine genocide, Nakba, Al-Shifa Hospital siege, International Court of Justice, South Africa. Right? They have to say a full story, and it sounds more verbose and there's more verbiage. And so when people hear that, they'll say, I've heard this like so many times and I'm bored of it. But when someone says October 7, it's snappy, it's short, it sounds smart, more concise, right? And that's the trick that they've played on us. If I say to you March 15, what does that mean to you? Unless it's your birthday, you probably, or anniversary or something, you're not thinking of anything. But March 15 was the date of the Christchurch massacre, where a gunman walked into a mosque and killed 51 people in that mosque. A very similar death count to the 7/7 bombings that happened in the UK. But they don't datify that, right? Because the wrong people died. The people who are supposed to be the bad guys died, so let's not datify it. Let's try and chuck it under the carpet and see you later. I mean, in fact, when you look at October 7th, it's so loaded that in my state in Australia, someone had a number plate for their car, OCT 7th, October 7th, you can probably make out from that. And this number plate was confiscated and removed, and the person was forced to put on another number plate because the people said this number plate is offensive because everybody knows what this number plate means, right? And that's the loaded language that they've done, and that's the trick that they've played on everyone. Datification only happens for events which can be used to justify war crimes or further subjugate people in their home country, like in the case of 7/7 and the subsequent anti-terrorism laws that came out of that. For people experiencing war crimes from at the hands of like Western powers, their events are not datified. They're just called something really watered down, like Gaza War. Right? It's not a genocide, it's just a war. There's no date. You don't say October 8th for that. You just call it a Gaza war. You don't call it a Lebanon invasion. You call it a ground operation or sending troops somewhere. You don't call it the, destruction of Iraq or but you just call it Iraq war, where over 200 and something thousand people were killed, civilians. You just call it like a war, like two sides. They'll get over it soon. There's no datification for people who are experiencing war crimes at the hands of the people who datify their own events.
This is what to do if you see a baby bird on the ground. Firstly, just check their overall health. As you can see, this little guy is noisy, he's feathered. Then we look for the parents. There they are. And then a safe space to pop him off the ground. As you can see, that tree where the parents were is a little high, so we pop him in the closest one and then just leave them be.
A lot of people struggle to obtain success simply because they're unaware of this life hack. If you try this, I find it very hard to not be successful. I know it's worked for me, and that's why I'm going to share it. Something I learned as a therapist is having seasons of doing absolutely nothing can actually catapult you into success. But how? How do you obtain success if you're not doing anything? Well, I'm glad you found this video because I'm going to tell you. The law of rhythm basically states that nature operates in cycles. Everything does, including you. Circadian cycles, menstrual cycles, seasons, everything. In order to maximize your productivity without doing so much work, that's something you're going to have to understand. To perform better, you have to have periods of time where you sit the fuck out of everything. So what's the science behind taking time off and still achieving things? Well, that falls on potential and kinetic energy. There are two forms of energy, potential energy and kinetic energy. Potential energy is the energy you build while you're resting. This energy gets transformed into kinetic energy, which is the energy of motion. The more potential energy you earn in your resting season, the more you have to turn into kinetic energy, which is the energy of motion. So the more productive you'll be and the better your performance will be. And this is the one thing many successful people leave out. One thing successful people do is rest. They might push to 5 a.m. or go hard narrative, but they do rest. So let's tie this back into the law of rhythm, which says everything in nature operates in a cycle. We see this in the fall of leaves, the hibernation of animals, etc. So the goal would be to obtain a substantial amount of rest, potential energy, but also to understand when it's time to get active, because too much rest will create too much potential energy. And if you don't get active and convert that potential energy into kinetic energy, well, that's a recipe for disaster. So how do we know when it's time to rest versus when it's time to get active? Luckily, our bodies will tell us. When you rest too much or when you've built up enough potential energy, you might begin to feel anxious or get racing thoughts. You might get a burst of ideas or even have a sense of FOMO. It's literally going to feel like there's something you should be doing. You won't be able to rest because your mind and body will be trying to indicate to you that it's time to move. And this goes both ways, right? If we're on all the time, we'll burn out and even start to experience symptoms of anxiety and depression as well. Y'all, this is how I use science to obtain success in my personal life, by understanding the flow of life, understanding that there's seasons, and partaking in all of them. I'm gonna keep it real. One thing I'm gonna do is rest when it's time. I love a good rest. And that's because when it is active season, when it's time to use that kinetic energy, I really lock in and go. So when it's time to rest and start building back up potential energy, I don't feel guilty or feel like I'm missing out because I maximized an active season. I can guarantee when you start living this way, you're going to start experiencing a lot of success. You're going to feel like you didn't even have to sweat for it, simply because you're behaving how you were born to behave, respecting your seasons and natural cycles. I'm making this video to kind of ease anyone's anxiety who's trying to burn themselves out or strain themselves in the process of accomplishing something. I'm also making this video for those of you who are not moving enough. A lot of the times we're just building up all this potential energy, ignoring all the signs that it's actually time to go, time to move, time to transform that energy into kinetic. And we think that we're not doing anything because we're depressed, but we're actually feeling symptoms of depression because we're not doing anything. We're not converting. Anyway, I hope this helps. If this is something you're going to try, let me know in the comments. Love y'all forever.
Can I say something in love that might sting just a little bit? The reason why a lot of you struggle in your private devotion is because you come to the scriptures primarily for answers rather than to seek out God.
If you have a dead battery that won't take a charge because you left it plugged into something for too long, this is how you fix it. Plug it in, you'll see that there's no status light. It's not charging. So DeWalt will tell you that it's broken and you have to buy a new one. Here's how you fix it. Take a battery that works and plug a wire into the positive side. There we go. And plug it into the positive side on the battery that is broken. Take the battery and plug it onto the negative side of the battery that works. Then you're just gonna touch the negative side here for 1 second. Just enough to give it a little bit of a zap. And now, when you plug it back in, it should give you the status light. Done deal.
People never develop like cities and walls, even written language, does not make them primitive or lesser humans.
When Western societies think of innovation, they usually think of technological advancements, computers, high-tech weaponry, megacities, but there's also social and cultural innovation. And when you look at many indigenous communities that were deemed primitive, they're often highly innovative. For example, First Nations people in Australia have very defined social customs, like the separation of men's and women's business and the use of dreamtime storytelling to pass down knowledge and teach generations how to live sustainably, which they did for millennia. I saw some ridiculous threads on Reddit that said, why didn't Indigenous Australians develop a civilization after so many years of living on the continent? And the replies were saying, oh, the land isn't good for agriculture and whatnot. No, they were highly civilized. There are multiple innovations that are still used today, obvious examples being boomerang and controlled burning, and they had a sustainable way of life that allowed plants, animals, and people to thrive. There was never a need to build concrete cities because that didn't serve anybody, not the people, flora, or fauna. Do people really think that cholera-ridden London was the peak of civilization? When I was in school, I was taught that when the British came to Australia, they saw that there was no farming or signs of civilization and therefore decided they could colonize. But that's not what happened. When you read Joseph Banks's diary, he clearly describes the indigenous people fishing in canoes right next to them. He describes seeing their houses. He describes their interactions and makes observations about how their language is different to other islanders. It was obvious from the start that Australia wasn't terra nullius, but that didn't fit in with their agenda for colonial expansion. Even today in 2024, people try to undermine indigenous peoples and suggest that they needed Western civilization to come save them, when actually that is the furthest thing from the truth.